Imagine a quiet summer morning in a respectable New England town. The year is 1892. The air is thick with the promise of August, and the most sensational crime America had ever seen is about to unfold, not in the shadowy alleys of a bustling metropolis, but behind the drawn curtains of a prominent family's home. Forget the gritty narratives of gangsters and hardened criminals. The first crime that truly captivated and horrified a nation involved a seemingly ordinary family, a brutal double murder, and a woman who would become a legend, Lizzie Borden. Our story begins in Fall River, Massachusetts, a city built on the booming textile industry. By the late 19th century, Fall River was a powerhouse, its mills churning out cloth, its streets lined with the elegant homes of the wealthy, and its society governed by strict Victorian sensibilities. Among its most prominent citizens was Andrew Jackson Borden, a man who, by all accounts, was a self-made millionaire. He had started modestly, but through shrewd business dealings, particularly in real estate and manufacturing, had amassed a considerable fortune. He was known for his frugality, some might say parsimony, a trait that often put him at odds with those around him, including members of his own family. Andrew Borden's household was a complex one. His first wife, Sarah Morse Borden, had passed away years earlier, leaving him with two daughters, Emma Lenora and Lizzie Andrew Borden. Several years after Sarah's death, Andrew married Abby Durfee Gray. While Abby was undeniably a loving stepmother in many regards and cared for the Borden girls when they were young, the relationship between her and her stepdaughters, particularly Lizzie, grew strained over time. Emma, the elder sister, often served as a mediator, a quiet figure, attempting to maintain a semblance of peace in a home that beneath its respectable facade was simmering with unspoken tensions. Andrew Borden, despite his wealth, maintained a rather modest lifestyle by the standards of his peers. His home at 92 2nd Street was comfortable but not ostentatious, lacking indoor plumbing in some areas and electric lighting, amenities that many other prominent families in Fall River already enjoyed. This frugality, combined with his sometimes stern and distant demeanor, often left his daughters feeling unappreciated, especially regarding their financial independence. Lizzie, in particular, despite being in her early 30s, felt stifled by her father's control over the family finances. She was unmarried, a rarity for a woman of her age and social standing, and still living under her father's roof, expected to conform to the rigid social expectations of a Victorian daughter. The stepmother, Abby Borden, while seemingly kind, was also a source of friction. There were rumors of resentment over property transfers, particularly a house Andrew had given to Abby's sister, which angered Lizzie and Emma. They believed that Abby was influencing their father's financial decisions to her own family's benefit, potentially diminishing their own inheritance. The internal dynamics of the Borden household were a powder keg, ready to ignite with the slightest spark. The fateful day was Thursday, August 4th, 1892. The morning began like any other, or so it seemed. Andrew Borden had breakfast, then went out to conduct his business. Abby Borden was tidying up the house. Bridget Sullivan, the family's maid, was working downstairs. Emma Borden was out of town, visiting friends in Fairhaven, leaving only Andrew, Abby, Lizzie, and Bridget in the house. Around 11:45 a.m., Andrew Borden returned home. He was feeling unwell and decided to lie down on the sofa in the sitting room for a nap. It was a seemingly ordinary moment that would soon be etched into the annals of American crime. What happened next is a blur of conflicting accounts and chilling details. According to Lizzie's later testimony, she had gone to the barn behind the house around 10:30 a.m. to look for lead sinkers for a fishing trip and then to eat pears. She claimed she was in the barn for approximately 20 to 30 minutes. It was shortly after 11 a.m. when Lizzie re-entered the house. What she claimed to discover would send shockwaves across the nation. Lizzie's scream pierced the morning quiet. Bridget Sullivan, who had been resting in her room after washing windows, rushed downstairs. "Someone has killed Father!" Lizzie cried out. Andrew Borden lay on the sofa, his head brutally disfigured, clearly the victim of a violent attack. He had been struck repeatedly with an axe or a hatchet.
The immediate chaos that followed saw neighbors alerted and Dr. Seabury Bowen, the family physician, summoned. As the initial shock began to wear off, a horrifying discovery was made upstairs. In the guest bedroom upstairs, Abby Borden's body was found. She too had been brutally murdered, struck with an axe, her body lying face down between the bed and the dresser. The sheer savagery of the attacks was almost unimaginable. Andrew had been struck 10 times, Abby 19. The murders were not random. This was personal. The initial investigation began almost immediately. The police found no signs of forced entry. Nothing of significant value appeared to have been stolen. This was not a robbery gone wrong. This pointed to an attacker who was either known to the family or who had intimate knowledge of the household's routine and layout. And only 2 people were known to be in the house that morning other than the victims, Bridget Sullivan and Lizzie Borden. Bridget Sullivan, the maid, cooperated fully with the police. She had been physically sick the night before, attributed to tainted food, and had been working diligently that morning. Her testimony seemed consistent, and she had no clear motive. Lizzie Borden, however, presented a more complex picture. Her initial statements to the police were contradictory and strangely dispassionate. She claimed she had been in the barn, but her timeline shifted. She spoke of a feeling of uneasiness, a sense of foreboding, yet her demeanor was described by many as remarkably calm, even cold in the face of such unimaginable horror. She asked police if they had searched the house, and when they affirmed, she suggested they look under the sink, where she mentioned a hatchet was usually kept.
The suspected murder weapon, a hatchet head, was indeed found in the cellar, near a hatchet handle. But it was clean, suspiciously clean. It showed no traces of blood, no hair, no tissue. Had it been washed? If so, by whom and when? The lack of the handle made it difficult to match precisely, adding another layer of mystery. Adding to the suspicion around Lizzie was the testimony of several witnesses. Alice Russell, a close friend of Lizzie's, stated that Lizzie had burned a dress in the kitchen stove on August 7th, 3 days after the murders, claiming it was stained with paint. Was it paint or was it blood? This act so soon after the murders raised significant eyebrows. Furthermore, Lizzie had attempted to purchase prussic acid, a powerful poison, a few days before the murders, claiming she needed it to clean a sealskin cloak, a claim the druggist found suspicious. The Fall River murders exploded into the national consciousness. Newspapers across America seized on the story, their headlines screaming of the brutality and the sensational accusation against a respectable woman. This was unprecedented. For the first time, a criminal trial became a form of national entertainment, a gripping drama playing out in real time across the pages of every daily paper. The public was captivated, horrified, and utterly obsessed. Lizzie Borden was arrested on August 11th, a week after the murders, and charged with the double homicide of her father and stepmother. The preliminary hearing and subsequent grand jury indictment led to her trial in June 1893. The prosecution built a case based on circumstantial evidence: Lizzie's presence in the house, her shifting alibi, the burning of the dress, the attempted purchase of poison, and the clear tensions within the Borden family, particularly concerning financial matters and the stepmother's relationship with Andrew. The trial was a spectacle. The courtroom was packed daily, reporters scribbling frantically, eager to capture every detail for their readers. The prosecution presented its case, highlighting the inconsistencies in Lizzie's story and suggesting a motive rooted in resentment and the desire for her inheritance. They painted a picture of a calculating woman driven to desperate acts. However, the defense, led by former Massachusetts Governor George Dexter Robinson, meticulously dismantled the prosecution's arguments. They pointed out the lack of a clear, undeniable murder weapon. The hatchet head, while suspicious, could not be definitively linked. They argued that Lizzie, a woman of her social standing, could not possibly have committed such a brutal and bloody crime. The prevailing Victorian societal view of women as delicate and incapable of such violence played significantly in the defense's favor. How could a refined lady wield an axe with such ferocity?
A crucial piece of evidence, Lizzie's testimony from the preliminary hearing, which was often confused and contradictory, was ruled inadmissible at the trial itself. This significantly weakened the prosecution's case. The defense also highlighted the absence of bloodstains on any of Lizzie's clothing, arguing that it would be impossible to commit such a gruesome act without being covered in blood. And the prosecution failed to establish a direct, irrefutable motive that would convince the jury beyond a reasonable doubt. After a trial that lasted 13 days, the jury retired to deliberate. The nation held its breath. Fall River, and indeed all of America, awaited the verdict. After just an hour and a half, the jury returned. Not guilty. The words echoed through the courtroom, through Fall River, and across the wire services to every newspaper in America. Lizzie Borden, the woman accused of one of the most shocking crimes in American history, was acquitted. She was free. Lizzie Borden walked out of that courthouse a free woman, but she was far from truly free. Fall River never forgave her. Despite the legal acquittal, public opinion remained sharply divided, with a significant portion of the town, and indeed the country, convinced of her guilt. She and Emma moved to a new house, a grander one, which Lizzie christened Maplecroft. They lived a life of relative isolation, ostracized by many of their former social circles. The whispers followed Lizzie wherever she went. Children would sing a macabre rhyme. Lizzie Borden took an axe and gave her mother 40 whacks. This rhyme, a distorted and exaggerated version of the facts, became an indelible part of her legend, cementing her image in the popular imagination as the axe murderess, regardless of the jury's verdict. Emma eventually moved out of Maplecroft in 1905 after a falling out with Lizzie, and the sisters never saw each other again. Lizzie lived out the rest of her days surrounded by her pets and a few close friends, dying in 1927 at the age of 66. Emma passed away just 9 days later. The mystery of the Fall River murders died with them, or so it seemed. To this day, the case of Lizzie Borden remains one of America's most enduring and fascinating unsolved mysteries. Generations of historians, true crime enthusiasts, and amateur sleuths have pored over the evidence, re-examining the testimonies, the circumstantial clues, and the psychological profiles of those involved. Why was Lizzie acquitted? Beyond the strong defense, many believe the prosecution simply failed to prove her guilt beyond a reasonable doubt. The lack of direct evidence, the powerful societal biases of the era against a woman committing such an act, and the general ineptitude of the Fall River police in the initial stages of the investigation all contributed to the verdict. The crime scene was compromised, evidence potentially mishandled, and a clear, coherent narrative of what transpired was never fully established by the state. But if not Lizzie, then who? Other theories have been proposed over the years. Some suggested Bridget Sullivan, the maid, driven by resentment or a hidden motive. Others pointed to an unknown intruder, a disgruntled business associate of Andrew Borden, or even a more elaborate conspiracy. However, none of these theories have ever gained substantial traction or provided compelling evidence to definitively shift the blame away from Lizzie. The hatchet theory, where Andrew's estranged illegitimate son or a transient committed the murders, has also been explored, but again without concrete proof. The truth remains stubbornly elusive, cloaked in the mists of history and human speculation. The legacy of Lizzie Borden is not just about a brutal double murder, it's about the birth of American true crime as a national obsession. It's about a society grappling with the idea that evil could reside in the most unexpected places, even within the confines of a respectable family home, perpetrated by someone who appeared to be above suspicion. Lizzie Borden became a cultural phenomenon, inspiring books, plays, songs, and even an opera. She remains a symbol of Victorian hypocrisy, a cautionary tale, and an enduring enigma. Was Lizzie Borden innocent, a victim of circumstance and an overzealous prosecution, or did America's first true crime celebrity, a woman trapped by the conventions of her time, did indeed get away with murder, forever shrouded in a mystery that continues to haunt us? The truth, perhaps, is darker than fiction, and history, in its quiet way, never truly forgets. The echoes of that August morning in Fall River continue to reverberate, inviting us to forever ponder what really happened at 92 2nd Street.